everyone, I have an apology to start out this video. I have lost track somehow, and it's really important for me to come clean. I am bad at math, apparently. Somehow I got off on my calculations by a month. And so today's video is actually my 20-month post-op update and not my 19th month post-op update, as chronologically you would suspect in my videos. So I don't know how that happened. I counted 15 times today. It's definitely my 20-month update. So I'm so sorry for anybody that I hurt during this miscalculation, for any falsities that I may have portrayed accidentally. But hey, today's video is my 20-month post-op update. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie and this is all about my life after gastric bypass surgery. And as I said, today is my 20-month post-op update. All the changes, all the updates, everything new that's been going on for the last month. I want to make sure you guys are updated. But before I get into that, I just want to say a quick thank you if you're a returning subscriber. Thank you so much for supporting my channel and continue to come back to videos. It means so much to me. If you're not yet a subscriber, if you enjoy this type of content, if you find yourself coming back to my videos, the best way to show your support is to hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you get notified whenever one of my videos goes live, and I thank you so much in advance for it. Where's my stuff? Where are my notes? I found them. This is blank. Found them. I could go back in all the videos and figure out where exactly I got off on that count, but honestly, it must have been very, very early on. I did switch from weekly updates to monthly updates, and that's probably where that ended up happening. So at some point along the way, I really have been sort of a month off where I was thinking I was in terms of the timeline, but a month is a month. I mean, it's a drop in the bucket compared to like the entire experience. So it's not too big of a deal that I'm on month 20 instead of 19. I'm going to start off with the stats right away, just in case you are kind of interested in that. But as I said in my last update video, I am de-emphasizing the weight on the scale. I'm not going to be diving into that quite as much, but I am going to be emphasizing things like pictures and measurements more often from this point on. So just as general information, I weighed in on July 1st at 199.2, which was me hitting Wonderland. And I did weigh in on August 1st at 204.1. So that's almost a 5-pound difference. And just for clarity, I weigh not only on the first of the month, just so that I have a very clear idea on my monthly weight loss and accomplishments in that respect, but I also weigh every Tuesday, and I've pretty much weighed every Tuesday since I had surgery, only skipping a couple for traveling reasons. And so I did weigh this morning, which was 203. So that's over 2-pound different from the day prior. This is a really good example of why I am de-emphasizing the weight on the scale, and why you should also de-emphasize the weight on the scale and not worry about it on a daily basis, because that was a 2-pound difference and I ate Chinese food in between that. So I mean, it's not like I worked out excessively and ate really well and lost 2 pounds overnight. The fluctuations are totally normal. That's just where I'm at. So I am still hovering around 202, 203, which is really where I've been hovering. I'll dip down below it. I'll go back up. But that's just where I've been for several months now after surgery. So I stopped caring, because what I also did was make sure that I took measurements. Now, I've been inconsistently taking measurements. I mentioned in an earlier video, way early on, do as I say, not as I do. I really wish that I had done more measurements throughout my journey more regularly, because I have these sporadic ones, and they were just going off of what the Bariatric app has me put in. And I don't think I was very consistent in terms of where I was measuring either, because I didn't really know what I was doing every time I did it. So I have some general numbers to go off of, but I don't take them very seriously. So what I did this month was I started new measurements. I started an Excel sheet where I break down a lot more measurements than what the Bariatric app has me do. And I specified for myself where I am measuring. So for example, when I'm measuring my waist, it just said waist in the Bariatric app. And I'm sure that people who, you know, are used to making or fitting clothing know exactly where to measure for your waist. But for me, I don't know if I was actually measuring the exact same spot every time. So this time I specified the smallest part of my waist as one of my measurements, and also the portion that goes like basically right along where my belly button is, which is essentially the widest part of my waist. Those are two different measurements that I am now going to be keeping track of. I also included a couple things like calves, because I'm personally very interested in my large calves and whether or not they change on a monthly basis. And I added ankles because why not? Let's see if there's change in my ankles. So the measurements that I took this month are kind of the starting measurements. So I don't really have anything to compare them to except for the measurements that I did a couple of months ago in my Bariatric app. And I don't know, because they weren't very specific, how much I really want to go off of that. So I'm considering this sort of my starting of regularly measuring every month. But if we do go off of the Bariatric app, I have lost 2 inches on my waist, which is awesome considering I'm not changing my weight at all. 2 inches around your waist is a pretty considerable amount. And I feel that in my pants. I do feel that in the way that my clothes fit. So I do think there is probably some truth to that there is definitely some loss around my waist. Most everything stayed about the same though. But I also took pictures. I am my own biggest critic. We all are our own biggest critics. So when I look at these pictures, I don't see anything that jumps out as a dramatic difference for me personally. Whether or not I see the 2 inches in my waist, I'm not really sure. What I do think that I see in these pictures this time though, is that it looks like my back fat and my back rolls are getting a little bit smaller, a little bit less rolly. My bra is fitting a little bit different, a little bit lower in my second picture. So I know that that's adding to it. But if you look at the other pictures, I really am seeing a little bit of a change there. And that means a lot because those are kind of rolly and those are they're just getting worse with the loose skin. So it's really nice to see that they're actually maybe getting a little bit smaller overall. And like I said, I'm feeling with the way that some of my shirts and some of my pants are fitting, that there is definitely still a change in my body. So not focusing so much on the weight, which isn't really changing, but focusing on what I can do and focusing on how things are fitting and how my body's physically changing are much better indicators of success, especially this late after surgery. The weight is just not gonna drop like a pound a day like it did before. It's just not gonna happen. It's not realistic. And that's okay because health is different along different points of the journey, and my goals are changing, and what I'm emphasizing and what I'm trying to do, it changes as I grow as a person and as I progress through this whole process. So, you know, keeping things fluid and changing and not being super stuck in one way of thinking keeps this open and keeps me open for change. So what really happened this last month, aside from some non-scale victories and things that I of course want to emphasize and I'll kind of get back to, is that I really noticed this month that I'm starting to fall a little bit out of some of the good habits that I had. And it just sort of stood out to me as something that I wanted to go back to basics. I really wanted to try and rein it in this month and try to get myself back on the track of some of those good habits that I was doing regularly every day or every week that really helped me feel like I was on track and mindful about health. And when I say health, I am kind of changing that narrative a little because it's not necessarily just weight loss that I want to focus on. It's about my general health. That's ultimately why I did the surgery, right? The weight loss is like, whoo, the big elephant in the room, right? Ugh, maybe that's a bad analogy, but that was the big part of the health journey was, hey, I need to lose a chunk of this weight. But the whole point of the surgery was to be healthy and to be healthier. So what kind of things have I been falling out of habit with? I mentioned in a prior video when it comes to like my food, I no longer weigh and track most of the food on a regular basis. And that's okay. That's a conscious decision. So I'm not necessarily going to go back to that because I think that I'm doing really well with that in a mental standpoint. I really want to make sure that I'm having more balance, because one of the things I noticed is that I will, kind of dip into less balanced eating. I don't want to say it's less healthy, because there's food morality issues here that I really don't want to get into, and I don't want to drudge up for myself. So it's not that I'm making bad food choices, but I want to make more balanced food choices. I don't shy away from food groups. I don't shy away from certain kinds of foods. I don't think that carbs are bad, but I do think everything needs to be done in moderation. And so if I'm having a snack that's a little more carb heavy, I want to make sure that I'm either pairing that with a protein, or that the food that I eat later in the day is lower in carbs and higher in protein to make that balance. I want to be eating more fruits and vegetables and more whole foods to help balance things out. And I just want to make sure that I'm mindful and having a well-rounded diet. I don't need to be scarfing down nothing but protein and cheeses and yogurts all day long anymore. I want to make sure that I'm incorporating fruits and vegetables and whole foods in my life, but at the same time, I also don't want to be migrating towards snacking on too many empty calories or carbs when I can find a more balanced approach. Ultimately is all I'm looking for here. I used to do this a lot before surgery when I was on Weight Watchers and things, where I would just make sure that my meals throughout the week were very balanced. I didn't have all pasta-based dishes all throughout the week. For example, if I had pasta one day, I made sure that I made something that was more like a stir fry and very vegetable and protein focused another day. I would almost always have one day a week where I had a very vegetarian-based, plant-based meal. I just try to keep things balanced. It keeps things interesting for me. It keeps me eating various kinds of nutrients and fruits and vegetables that are good just for your body in general, and it just keeps things in balance. So that's what I'm going to kind of work back into. Another thing that I have fallen out of habit with and seems to happen periodically all the time, and I'm sure other people really struggle with this too, is staying hydrated. I have really fallen out of habit of making sure that I am staying well hydrated with at least 64 ounces of water a day. And part of that comes with this extra snacking and not being as balanced with my food. If I'm snacking more throughout the day, I am not drinking enough, because I am still waiting a chunk of time after eating before drinking. Today is a really good example. I've barely had any hydration today, and I snacked a little bit too much. I kind of grazed on little things throughout the day rather than eating like a well-defined breakfast and then lunch, which has thrown off my hydration. I don't want to do that. So I want to make sure that I'm taking myself out of those bad habits. I'm just making sure that I'm focusing more on hydration and less on snacks, because the water is way more important than the snacks are, trust me. And kind of going along with that, I want to make sure that I'm being mindful. Again, a lot of this is about just being mindful, not getting into these mindless habits of eating and functioning without really thinking it through and thinking about what I'm doing. I want to be mindful again about making sure that I'm only eating when I'm actually hungry. I've been noticing that I'm snacking a little, grazing throughout the day. It's affecting my hydration, but also it's just affecting things in general. It's probably a really good reason why my weight stays the same. I'm not always eating just when I'm hungry. And that's a really big thing that is kind of glaring out at me right now as a warning sign, because that was always a problem that I had in the past. I would just eat because it was either time to eat or I felt like eating. It wasn't necessarily having anything to do with whether or not I actually was hungry. And so waiting until I feel that hunger is really important to me. But it's also a very fine line, because I get hangry very easily. So I have to be very mindful about my body and the cues that I am receiving, the signals I'm receiving. Right now is a good example. I snacked throughout the afternoon. I did not have a defined lunch. And so at this point, I'm just kind of riding it out until I get hungry for dinner. Instead of eating dinner at dinner time, which was about an hour ago, I am waiting until I start to feel, okay, I need some food now. I am clearly still working off of the snacks and the bits of food that I was eating before. I don't need dinner right now. So I'm working on the video, I'm working on some other things, and then when I get hungry, I will eat my dinner. I also want to emphasize that when I say I was snacking and stuff throughout the day, I mean, I'm literally eating off of this watermelon that I cut in half and just took into my office. So I'm not necessarily eating like crappy food. The other thing that I did take into the office are the baked chips though. So, I mean, I've had a weird mix of food today, but it's not all bad. This is why I don't want to assign morality to food. I just grazed on watermelon and chips for an extended amount of time while I was working, and now I'm not hungry. And this is probably a good reason why a lot of nutritionists recommend that you eat, 3 to 5 established meals throughout the day rather than grazing on things, because it kind of throws everything off. And now I've just been snacking on watermelon and I'm not hungry. And so I want to get back into just feeling like I am more deliberate with my food choices and with my eating habits and with my drinking habits. I just want to be more mindful and more deliberate. So I'm going to put the effort into that, because this is not, unfortunately, an effortless process that I get to just sit back and be like, well, I got surgery, so I don't have to think about anything. It's just not the case. I have to think and I have to put in a lot of effort. Otherwise, you start to fall into old habits, but you also just start to fall out of the good, positive, healthy habits that I started building. So I'm just kind of reining it in and I'm calling it back to basics. I want to make sure that I'm just mindful and going back to the basics of what was taught to me after surgery. So what are some of the non-scale victories that happened this month? Oh my gosh, let me tell you. If you saw my community tab post, I was in Juneau, Alaska visiting my mom. And part of that is that we climbed a mountain. That was the second mountain that I've ever climbed. So I did one last summer as well. And this one I found to be much easier than the last one. So I think I'm getting better at it. But it was also a bucket list item for me. It was something that I had always thought would be really fun to do. I knew of people who had done it when I used to live there and I went to school there, and people would climb up the backside of this mountain and then they would go into the aerial tram building where there's a restaurant and a gift shop and all of the stuff that the tourists go to. They go up the aerial tram, up into the mountain. For me, we climbed up the backside and then took the tram down. So you don't have to do, the whole up and down climb. You get to take the fun tram all the way back down as kind of a reward for climbing up the mountain. And I always thought it would be so fun to do, but I was in no shape in college to be able to actually do that. To be able to say, you know what, I really want to do that, and then make it happen was really, really cool, because it wasn't just, I would like to do that. We really planned that. We're scouring the weather apps and we're trying to figure out the best day to do that. And we managed to pick the perfect day to do it, where it was overcast, but it wasn't rainy, and it rained the rest of the trip. We were like, we should do it now. Now is the day to do it. And we ran out there and we did it, and it was awesome. And I'm so glad we did, because if we tried to do it any other day, it would have been pouring down rain and we wouldn't have been able to do it, and we probably wouldn't have wanted to. That was awesome. I put my mind to it. We were like, no, this is happening, and we did it. Another thing that was kind of a non-scale victory on that trip that kind of stuck out to me was that we took the fishing boat out. We tootled around, did some fishing, slept on the boat, did a couple of things for just the one day of nice weather that we had. It was such a fun experience, and I'm really excited to share that with you next week. One of the things is that I was climbing in and out of the boat, and I was, jumping in and out, and like I had no issues with mobility. I had no issues with feeling like I was too heavy to do something or to function. I was climbing out the back of the boat and sitting on the back with my legs hanging out while we were fishing. I mean, I had no issues doing what I wanted to do, physically climbing in and out of the boat, jumping in and out of the boat. I mean, it was just freeing to be able to just enjoy myself on the water and not wonder if I could get in and out of the boat. I mean, at one point we had to drive the boat up to the beach and then climb over the bow and get into the boat from the beach. And although I did step on a bucket, you know, it's one of those things that, like, in the past, I don't know if I physically would have been able to do that very easily. It would have been a much more difficult scramble to get into the boat. So that just felt really freeing. That's what I've noticed these days, and why I try to focus on what I can do and how my life has changed since this weight loss and since this surgery. I have way more open doors, way more things that I do without even thinking about it that would make me hesitate in the past because of my weight, because of my size, and because of my limitations. And then finally, we have been having some pretty awful weather in terms of heat. It's like 90 some odd degrees around here lately, and that is just not what I'm built for in the Pacific Northwest. So we've been pretty miserable. So one night after work, we went out and took the dog to one of the lakes nearby and just had fun splashing around in the water. He was learning how to swim a little bit better, which was so fun to watch. And I just enjoyed myself after work, hanging out in a swimsuit for everyone to see. And I didn't even really once think about like being self-conscious or anything. I actually felt really good in my swimsuit. It was a brand new swimsuit, and I was just like, yeah, I'm out here and enjoying the sun and enjoying the lake, and I look good while I'm doing it. And it just felt good to feel that way, when so many times in the past I would struggle to cover myself up and not feel confident just living my life. Like, nobody cares anyway. I mean, maybe somebody was like, ooh, she looks good. But like, nobody's sitting there judging me for just enjoying my life at the lake with the dog. In fact, everybody was staring at the dog because he's so cute, and they kept saying how adorable he was. Nobody cares about me in my swimsuit. But that's not the mentality that we sometimes have when we're very self-conscious about our weight and our size and our look. And that's how I lived most of my life, was just feeling like everybody's eyes were on me, because that's all I could think about. So of course everybody else was thinking about it too, right? And it just feels very freeing and very wonderful to just live my life and not feel like everybody is staring at me and judging me. I'm very aware that that's not what happened before. I'm very aware that that was just my perception. But the way that I live my life and the way that I enjoy my life now, with that not being my perception, is a million times better, is just so much more comfortable than I really realized when it came to how I was operating in the past. So in my opinion, I've had some pretty powerful non-scale victories this month, if I do say so myself. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this was a relatively interesting 20-month post-op update. There's still changes, still positive things happening in my life, even this far after surgery. Things don't just end when the weight loss slows down. Life still keeps going, and life still keeps getting better. So make sure you stay happy and healthy, and always look at the big picture, and I will see you guys in the next one.